Welcome to the 5th module of Biosafety Training at UW-Milwaukee. In this module, you will learn about personal protective equipment. Let's begin. Now let's take a look at PPE, or personal protective equipment. There are 3 pieces to selecting and using PPE. The first is risk assessment. By completing a risk assessment, you will be able to use this as a guide for selecting the appropriate PPE for the work you will be conducting in your laboratory. Dress to protect. Dress appropriately for the laboratory. This includes closed-toed shoes, pants, short or long-sleeve shirt that fits comfortably under your PPE, and your long hair is pulled back. At a minimum, lab coats, safety glasses, and disposable gloves are to be worn, regardless of the biosafety level. Additional PPE would be determined in your risk assessment. The third piece is to have a standard operating procedure for donning and doffing PPE, and not just have one somewhere in a binder in your laboratory, but regularly use it. If you don't know how to properly don or doff your PPE, you will probably not use it correctly, which in turn would negate any kind of protective effect it would have and lead to you potentially being exposed or exposing others to pathogens. Lab coats are required in all BSLs at UW-Milwaukee. It is recommended that you use a disposable lab coat or a tie-back gown. If you are using cloth lab coats, you are required to have a routine laundering service in place for your laboratory if you are working in a BSL-2 laboratory. Lab coats are not to leave the labs. You should not wear your lab coat outside of your lab to your office area, a cafeteria or break room, conference rooms, across campus, etc. They should always remain in the laboratory. For eye, face, and mucous membrane protection, it is important that you understand the necessity for protecting yourself from any potential splashes or particles that may get into the air and land in your eyes, face, mucous membranes. Refer to OSHA 29 CFR 1910.133 to look at all of the requirements necessary for occupational safety and safety glasses in the work environment. Safety glasses must be worn at all times in the laboratory. If there is a splash risk, splash goggles or face shields should be worn. It is necessary to note that face shields may be used to protect the whole face, but you should still be wearing eye protection under the face shield like your safety glasses. Gloves are also a necessity at all biosafety levels. Appropriate gloves must be worn for activities involving potentially infectious materials. When you are wearing your gloves, do not wash or reuse the gloves. Dispose of all used gloves as biohazardous waste when handling biohazardous materials. Respiratory protection may be required when working with infectious agents that can be transmitted via infectious droplets or aerosols. If you believe you require respiratory protection, visit our Safety and Assurances Respiratory Protection Program page for more information. To don PPE, these are some basic steps. It may vary dependent upon what types of PPE requirements are necessary in your laboratory. This is just one example of a process for donning PPE. Step 1. Wash your hands. If you're using boot covers, put on the boot covers. If working in BSL 2+ or higher, put on your first pair of gloves. Then don your lab coat, gown, or coveralls, ensuring the cuff is over the first pair of gloves. Put on your respirator when applicable, ensuring a snug fit and making sure there are no gaps. Put on glasses, goggles, or face shield and adjust to fit. Don your second pair of gloves or the pair of gloves you will be wearing and make sure there is no gap between your gloves and the lab coat sleeves. If this is the second pair, make sure they go over the cuffs of the lab gown sleeves. And finally, if you are wearing a PAPR, put on your hood last. To doff PPE, here are a set of basic steps. Use an alcohol-based sanitizer if you are handling infectious materials to decontaminate the outside of your gloves. Remove your gloves. If you are wearing 2 pairs, only remove the first pair. Remove your eye protection. Remove the lab coat, gown, or coveralls being worn. Remove the respiratory protection if applicable. If you are wearing boot covers, remove the boot covers, taking care to avoid touching your shoes or pants. You should be stepping into a clean area as the covers are removed. If wearing 2 pairs of gloves, remove the second pair after removing all other PPE. Finally, wash your hands and wrists thoroughly. A critical component of PPE doffing is removing your gloves in such a way that minimizes the risk of contamination. To remove your first glove, pinch and hold the area outside of the glove near the wrist area, avoiding contact with any exposed skin. Peel the glove downwards away from the wrist, turning the glove inside out to fold it into itself and keeping the contaminated area away from direct contact. Pull the now removed glove away until it is removed from the hand, holding it with the inside-out glove in the still gloved hand. With the 2 forefingers of the ungloved hand, slide them under the wrist of the remaining glove, avoiding contact with the outer surface of the glove. Peel the glove downwards away from the wrist, turning the glove inside out. Finally, continue to pull the glove down and over the inside-out glove, being held in the gloved hand until entirely removed. Make sure you are decontaminating all of your personal protective equipment as necessary. Never ever wear disposable gloves more than one time. Gloves can go in the general trash if they are not used when handling anything biohazardous, chemically hazardous, or radioactive. In biosafety level 2 and higher labs, everything should always be treated as potentially contaminated and placed in the biohazard bin, not in the general trash. Finally, be considerate. Think about the person that handles the trash from your lab. Never put anything that may be hazardous in the general trash, biological or chemical. Remember, gloves are never a substitute for thorough hand washing when entering the lab, after removing your gloves, and before leaving the laboratory. Wash your hands for a minimum of 20 to 30 seconds with copious amounts of liquid soap and water, then rinse for at least 10 seconds. If you are not using a hands-free sink, use paper towel to turn off the tap to prevent accidentally recontaminating your hands from the faucets. Make sure you pay attention to your hand washing habits. Don't forget in between your fingers, under your nails, the tops of your hands, and your wrists. Why does good hand hygiene matter? It is noted that on average, about 95% of people do not wash their hands properly. It is important that you do not bring your work home all because you didn't wash your hands properly. This concludes Module 5, Personal Protective Equipment.